so everyone can see the agenda. Before we go ahead and get started, can I get a thumbs up from people? Can they see the agenda? I know I'm so grateful for that. This just never know with technology these days. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Tuesday, May 11th. It's our May MTAP Steering Committee meeting. Before we get started, let's go ahead with a roll call of steering committee members, and then I'll turn it over to Don. Is obviously Don Chartock's here. I see Jen. Brody, Colorado.
Hi guys, thanks.
Kristen from Iowa.
Here.
Caitlin from Tennessee.
I'm here.
Mark from Texas.
Yep.
Liz from Florida. She said she might be late. Didn't know if she was here. Shirley from Mississippi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shelley from New Hampshire.
Sir.
Dave from New Mexico. Oh, he's skipping out on us. Charles from Mississippi. All right. Now, if everybody doesn't mind, for the rest of y'all, please send us a virtual chat with your first chat, hopefully not the last chat, but send us your name and your organization and let us know, just to let us know that you're with us and hanging out with us for the afternoon while we go through this meeting. All right. So if you're not a member of the steering committee, please send us a chat with your name and your organization. Thanks so much. I'll keep track of those. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Don.
Very good. Richard did a very good job of setting us up for the meeting and welcoming everybody. So it's good to see everybody again. With that, let's get right into it. And I see Jean's face. Jean, are you gonna lead this next discussion? And you're on mute.
I wanted to be just like you, Don. So yes, so I'm gonna lead this discussion, but I brought along a special guest who is much more well versed on it than I am, and she'll do the real leading. But so just as background, I am the Council on Public Transportation's representative on the intercommittee working group on connected and automated vehicles, and we have put together a set of guiding principles and policy priorities. It's in a draft format right now, and we really want to get input on those principles. And you should have received, though I don't know if I did, an MTAP alert. And if you haven't, you'll receive it very shortly. That asks you to give us your input on some specific policies that are specifically relate to public transit. But then at the end, also we'll give you an opportunity to give general input on all of those policies. And it's really important, as you know, that public transit voice gets heard, and from a state DOT perspective, and also kind of representing your transit agencies, so that we are not forgotten in this venue. So I'm counting on all of you to please respond. You've got a couple weeks to do that. So you've got some time, so I really would appreciate it. But I brought along with me today virtually, Kristen White from the Minnesota DOT, and she's been really instrumental in putting this together and is a really important member of this working group. So I am going to ask Kristen if she would talk us through. You were all, I believe, sent a PowerPoint along with your invitation or information about this meeting, and she'll talk you through that. Not word for word. Don't worry, Richard. We're not going to, she won't read the whole thing to them. So I'm going to throw it over to Kristen so she has much time as she needs to talk us through this.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Richard. Everyone, pleasure to meet you all. For those I haven't had an opportunity to connect with, I'm Kristen White, and I lead the Minnesota Office of Connected and Automated Vehicles. And I apparently have an intern with me today. My young dog, Theodore, is trying to chime in as well. So we'll try and keep that background noise to a minimum. Just quickly today, since we don't have much time, but want to introduce this concept, the reason for a series of guiding principles is several. First, as you probably are familiar or have heard, many states are still unclear in how to invest in unknown technologies that will impact our future. Some states like Michigan and Jean's region really are already having to plan and pilot and implement programs, whether it's transit or other funding, public-private partnerships. And so policymakers across the country really need some help in understanding more about the technology and what actual policy and other investment priorities we should be thinking about. Industry is going to policymakers, as you can imagine, and proposing draft bills, but they don't always meet the state DOT or other transportation organizational needs. Some additional background on how we got to here today is over the last 2 years, several other committees in AASHTO developed some early guiding principles, very specific to connected vehicle infrastructure. So for those of you that might have heard about some original principles and are thinking, gosh, this sounds familiar, it should, because the AASHTO board approved these about 1.5 years ago. And so we're building these to be more holistic and more reflective, and recognizing the fact that connected and autonomous technology doesn't just impact one aspect of an organization and a DOT, it really impacts a lot of different areas. And so while other states like Minnesota, California, and others are developing their own state principles, AASHTO realized that we need to advocate for ourselves as the Auto Alliance, the tech industry, and ITS America, several of the national coalitions in this field, have already finalized their own guiding principles to advocate for this work. So we took all of that, this intercommittee working group, the small working group, and we compiled this into the principles we're going to share just shortly. And as we did this, starting in January, even more things changed. Very importantly, the new American Jobs Plan, which conspicuously omitted some autonomous vehicle technologies because we feel we have an opportunity to advocate for some guiding policy principles in the future. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the top 10 principles just to give you background, but as Jean already introduced, there is one section that really does impact some of the work you all do, we'd like some reflection on. The top 10 principles, first and foremost, is that we don't actually have a national strategy, vision, or plan. Unlike countries like the United Kingdom and Singapore and China, they have documented 10 to 15-year plans where private industry, the transportation, public sector organizations, and communities come together to advocate for that vision. Second is we know that safety has to be a critical policy priority. Third, we know that as many of the private sector industry participants are moving towards an autonomous future, we in the state DOTs feel that a redundant connected vehicle world has to be a part of that conversation. So our policy position is connected vehicle technologies and autonomous technologies need to be paired together because we at the state level cannot sacrifice safety. A fourth, and this is where we're going to get into a little bit detail today, is we really need some more help with federal investment, and it has to be flexible and nimble, and it needs to be even more nimble than what we've seen over the past 15 months. Fifth, we're going to be working closely with the Sustainability Task Force, the Electric Vehicle Intercommittee Working Group, to make sure that all of these technologies are sustainable and reduce emissions. Next, and again, and not in any particular order, equity, access, and improving quality of life has to be at the heart and the center of all of this work, especially with the recent board resolution that AASHTO passed. Of course, with any policy principles, you're seeing some alignment with items 7 and 8. We need some sort of national policy on this topic. There's a patchwork approach. There's about 41 states that have executive orders, laws, or no laws, but still allow these autonomous technologies to be piloted. We believe that we can still protect the ability for states to be democratic laboratories while also seeing some sort of more uniform guiding approach. And lastly, but not least, we need to continue engagement like this, but also with communities. So we need federal help, and to do that, the US DOT needs to be at the table with us as we convene with local governments, with MPOs, and with many transit organizations as well, to make sure we're hearing them as we develop these principles. And 10, it was reflected in some of our early feedback that we need to make sure there's a principle on securing these technologies, keeping data private and confidential, and seeing how we can share information across sectors. So there is in the document, I'm not going to read this to you, but in the document, there are a couple draft policy statements that the board will likely be reviewing this fall. This one focuses on summarizing these 4 pages of principles into one cohesive statement that we can take to individual, local, and congressional policymakers. And then last, I just want to share a little bit about some of the early states and feedback we've heard before I dive into some of the more specifics for you all. We've convened across several AASHTO committees already, as well as the MASTO region. That's why you see the bright red heart of America all lit up. I chair the MASTO CAB committee as well as the National Strategy on Automation. So we've been doing the roadshow like this to make sure we get feedback and let you all know what we're working towards. And some of the early feedback that I want to make sure that you're hearing and seeing is that overwhelmingly, states are seeing a use and need for these principles. There might be some changes to some of the language you'll see in the Word document that Richard and others sent out. But these are some of the common things we're seeing. Make sure you're protecting safety and security and cybersecurity. Make sure that you emphasize interoperability, because these go from state to state, region to region, that we need a vision for connected and automated vehicles, and that the public sector and state DOTs cannot do this alone. We need to work with the private sector and communities to do that. We also need to make sure our colleagues at all levels of government, including the US DOT and the Highway Administration, are involved, and maybe even international reflections as well, since many of you are also in information sharing exercises globally. And eventually we want to summarize this with some sort of informational material for policymakers and all of us who do this work. I will admit, some of my state colleagues have told me in confidence that they've expressed some frustration that we don't have these to date, but that's why we're doing this work today. So with that, I'm just going to pause here and let you know our next steps. After I hear from you today, I plan to summarize this documentation, not attributing it to any one of you or any state, but we take this back to this little working group and we're compiling all this information together. And then in June, the intercommittee working group is meeting again to finalize this work and then prepare it as it goes to other larger committees like the policy forum and eventually the board. So when I pause to hear from all of you, again, please know that we want to hear your technical expertise. We do not anticipate you to speak on behalf of your DOT or your DOT leadership or other organizational leadership. We really just want a gut reaction on whether or not these resonate with you. I'm going to go back a few slides and just call out one item in particular for this group. There is some conversation in item 4, if you have the document in front of you. Principle 4 is really talking about this innovative federal infrastructure investment, some more opportunities for multimodal transit, public-private partnerships, and other digital and physical infrastructure to support this work. So that's probably where I would point you first if you haven't had a chance to review the whole document. So Jean and Richard, I'm going to pause here and see if I can't just listen to the rest of the group and hear any ideas or help answer questions.
Great. Thank you, Kristen, so much for that overview. So we really are just, I mean, this isn't your only opportunity. Obviously, you're going to be able to respond to that MTAP request, but if we could just get some initial thoughts on what you're hearing here and what you've seen, if you've had a chance to look at the policy, the draft policy. I believe Richard shared that.
It just went out.
It just went out. Okay.
About 5 minutes ago. So everyone should have it in their inbox.
Okay. I'm going to see if I can, if you want me to share my screen, I could put on the details from number 4. I'm going to make it a little bigger and then see if I can get it on the screen in a way that will work for y'all. So let's see. I believe. Can you see my?
We cannot. So hold on one sec.
Wait, I got to hit share.
There you go.
Now, can you see it where it says number 4, innovative federal infrastructure investment? Is that what you're seeing? Okay. Yep. So this is some more detail on that specifically. And hopefully you can read it. I don't know if it's large enough for you to read. I can make it a little bigger if you'd like, but I'm going to give you a second just to kind of read it and then provide any initial thoughts that you have on that.
So it may be elsewhere. I didn't see it on the list, but this is our first chance to take a look at it. I bet our partners, in the public transportation world, would love to see a big focus on first mile, last mile, and that use of autonomous vehicles, in order to pay the best benefit for the overall transportation system, is helps people get to the trunk lines and be able to travel efficiently that way.
And some of that may fall under number 6, right? And so we can look at calling out some examples like that. That's my thought, that it fits under number 6. I'm open to other thoughts.
Are there others on the
So
call?
I'm-
Comment?
I'm wondering, this is Kristen from Iowa DOT. I'm wondering, is there any consideration for how, and maybe this is too far back, but how integrating these new technologies will work with, people aren't going to be able to afford instantly. We're not going to have a whole brand new fleet across the nation of brand new vehicles that are connected and automated. And, we'll still have, 1985 Dodge minivans driving around out there. So, I mean, how does that work together? And are there any of these statements addressing that?
So Kristen, that's a fantastic comment, and not because your name is also Kristen. Although I'll make note of that one. But there is some opening commentary about how we have to address the challenges of a mixed fleet environment. But I think to your point, Kristen, we could probably call that out a little bit more powerfully to show that we have to plan for people who still choose and want to drive traditional vehicles.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
I
Anyone
think
else?
that goes to the equity thing too, because it's going to be a while before people can afford to switch to the new technologies. Not just transit systems, but just general drivers.
Yeah, and I think some of that talk can go under number 9 as well, federal leadership and fostering collaboration and community engagement. I think it's only through that collaboration that we're going to be able to figure out how to incorporate mixed fleets. I mean, we're delving into that. And any of you who've even just implemented electric buses, that that's a challenge. You've got 2 different sets of needs and different fueling and different, all of these things. So I think it's definitely something we need to address here too. Any other initial thoughts? Okay, so this just went out to you, the MTAP alert. So please check through your emails for that, and just give some thought. And if you want to reach out to anyone else in your organization to help give that feedback or talk to a few transit agencies, whatever, I think the more input, the better, and the more well-rounded that input comes from, the better. So I appreciate y'all giving it some of your time, and thank you, Kristen, very much for walking us through that and assisting with this. So with
Thank you,
that,
everyone. And
Richard?
I've shared my email, Jean, and everyone in the chat box, should you have any follow-up questions, but Jean can handle that as well. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Kristen.
And
Thanks,
just so you
Richard.
know, the alert is in on MTAP. It's an MTAP alert. It's also in a survey form using a Survey Monkey, so it's relatively easy to complete. So all the information you need to react to is actually in the alert and in the survey. So feel free to please complete it at your earliest convenience.
Now I just have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Oh, here it is. Okay, I don't use Zoom.
Just hit stop share.
Here. Yep. Okay.
Now I've got to make sure everyone can still see the share on my end.
There you go, Richard. You want to start us out on the work plan updates?
Yes, I definitely do. And that was a technical feat. We shared screens among different people. It was scary for a second. But first, before we go there, I want to recognize, I saw online, Dave Harris is with us. So welcome, Dave. And I saw Charles joined us. And I thought I saw the vice chair of the Council on Public Transportation, Ron Epstein. Welcome, Ron. Glad you're joining us. But now I will get quickly into our work plan updates, and starting with communications. Now I haven't done this in a while, but I'm going to put a plug in for the MTAP e-news. Hoping members are all receiving it. As you know from my discussion about it, it's really an aggregate newsletter of all the emails I receive from places from FTA, from APTA, from CTAA, from the National Center on Mobility Management, National RTAP, and all of our partners. I sort of envision every 2 weeks that, I get all these emails. I figured you all are really way too busy to read all this stuff. So I come up with some nifty headlines and put everything into one place so you could see that, plus some training, whatever educational seminars that are taking place. And I'm hoping you all are getting it. I'm hoping you all are reading it. So it's just one email that you get and you get quickly updated. So I send out enough email these days. So I figured this one email puts all of these emails in one place that you can just read through it. So I'm hoping members are getting it. I'm hoping members are clicking on it and opening it. Please click through it if you find something interesting that suits you. Next, in terms of newsletters, you should know, because it was in the MTAP e-news, as well as sent out as a separate email, that the winter spring newsletter was released on April 29th. Also on the topic of publications, the 2021 Survey of State Funding in Public Transportation is now available, published as of April 28th. So members get one free copy. It's by copy, I mean, you don't ever really get a hard copy anymore because we're not doing mailings anymore. So it's sort of a PDF, and you get a license to use it. Free copy from your librarian or whoever the gateway person is at your state DOT who handles publications from AASHTO. I sent out an email along with a spreadsheet, so please refer to that individual at your state to obtain your copy. And I will leave it at that. Next, are there any questions? Has anybody tried to access the Survey of State Funding in Public Transportation and has had trouble? I'm gonna throw that out as a question, because I know sometimes in the past, I know Ed from Florida, he used to have a lot of trouble getting his copy. So that is an open question. Has anybody tried to access it? Send me a chat if you've had any difficulties. We will try to resolve that situation. Going once, going twice. All right, it's perfect. I like to hear a good system. In terms of membership, expect dues for upcoming membership coming out sometime this month and early next month. You should be aware that, again, we're sending out invoices for membership, but this year, we didn't do so badly given that COVID and the pandemic. We had 46 members. We're too short of our high of 48 during Dave's tenure. He's very proud of that. And I think 46 is not bad for this past year. So thank you for all you who rejoined MTAP. Are there any questions?
Richard, quickly.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to track down our payment?
Yes, sir. You were counted among the 46.
All right, thank you much.
Yes, sir. Other questions? All right. Hearing none. The last statement we received that was from my accounting office was for our March statement. And at that point, our revenue was $232,000. Our expenses to date, of course, $81,422, leaving a net revenue of $150,578. Now, let's go to everyone's favorite topic, meetings. I'll give a quick update on where things are at. So I had a recent conference call, Zoom call, however, Microsoft Teams is what FTA uses. We had a conversation about the upcoming 19th biennial FTA state programs meeting. Ilan Flippen is back and she hosted this conference call. So the dates that I think I mentioned on the last call, now you have to completely ignore because again, they coincide with the TRB Executive Committee. So none of the partners are all the partners are going to be at the TRB Executive Committee, and no one's going to be available for the state programs meeting for those dates. So the focus right now, apparently, as primary dates, is the first week of August, August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The target for the date, the hours are 12 noon Eastern to 4 p.m. Eastern, with the backup of the week of August 16th. The idea is to have the CEO session, which is usually the kickoff session on August 3rd as the first session, so that would be around noon. But I can tell you from my perspective and from Astro's perspective, Jim Timon is unable to make that August 3rd date. He might, if we're going to go forward with this, he might have to pre-record his component of the CEO session. It might not be available for a live Q&A, but we'll see, depending on the availability of not only of Nuria Fernandez, Deputy Administrator of FTA, but Paul Skatelis at APTA and Scott Bogren of CTAA. So we're still holding, but again, the primary date's August 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So please mark your calendar. Backup week of August 16th. Now we also talked quickly, went through quickly over a bunch of suggested topics. Intercity bus sort of rose to the top as a conversation piece and a suggested topic. Other things like oversight and state management reviews, planning, equity, new funding opportunities, incidental use, and the pandemic sort of like rounded out the bottom. But stay tuned for confirmation. Again, go with the primary dates as sort of the save the date and the session time from noon to 4 Eastern.
Richard?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, is that to be held virtually?
All 100% virtually.
Okay, thanks.
The unfortunate thing is that they're still taking quarantine seriously and COVID seriously. So we've moved from, they were thinking hybrid, but then decided, well, just going to go virtual because of all the difficulties and the fears of not being, states not being able to travel to Washington, D.C. My disappointment, because I think this is one of the best, one of the good meetings of the year, and I really enjoy it. And I really love seeing everybody come to D.C. But it is what it is. We'll do virtual. Don, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to do a humble brag because I would have liked to have been there because I'm dropping my daughter off at Georgetown for the first time this fall. And so I could have come in person and done both at the same time.
That is a wonderful brag. That's not a humble brag. That's good for you. I want to drop my kids off. Can they go just somewhere? They're like 10 and 12. I just want to put them somewhere. They're home all the time. But anyway, thank you for that. Yes, I was really hoping we'd be able to do this in person, but it's just not in the cards. But speaking of in person, let's just go over quickly what I know about the winter meeting. You all should have heard, if you were attending the State DOT Roundtable, that Jim Timon officially blessed the idea of co-locating the Council on Public Transportation and MTAP winter meeting with the CTAA Expo this fall, the week of November 8th through 12th. That's the dates of the Expo, but he's sort of given the official blessing that if we're going to go, if we can do in-person meetings, we can co-locate with them. So I'm very happy about that. And I hope that members of the steering committee, as well as members of MTAP, appreciate that and will take part in this. I think it'll be a benefit to both organizations. I think give people a reason. First off, if you're stuck at home, you really want to go and travel somewhere, and if they're having the Expo, you'll travel there. You can attend a lot of the sessions of the Expo and then attend our meeting. We haven't settled on any dates yet. I'm still working with their staff to sort of the logistics about how this is going to happen. One critical question I'd like to ask is, so you all know that when we have this event, our annual event, we have a rate that members pay, and then we have a rate that non-members pay. And technically, the only people who ever pay the non-member rate are the sponsors of our organizations and our organization winter meeting. They're the ones, Panther's great about that, and Route Match by Uber is great about that, but they're really the only ones who pay that rate. I'm not sure we need to, I don't know, again, going forward what this is going to look like, but I guess the question remains is, do we want to make our winter meeting part of the CTAA Expo agenda, which would blast it out to a larger audience, potentially increasing the size of our meeting and opening it up to other people. I just throw that out there because that was one of the first questions I got from CTAA. They're like, well, do we need to advertise this? I was like, oh, I haven't thought about that, because they get, as you know, a significant number of people. If you've been to their expo, I think it's fantastic. They get a significant number of people, and this would open it up to members of CTAA. And we might have to work out the logistics in terms of what they would pay versus what we would pay to go to theirs. You know, if there's a sort of a trade-off, we would get a discount on the expo. Would they get a discount on our attending our meeting? It's just a food for thought. Does the steering committee have any initial thoughts on that? I see Kristen turn on her camera.
Yeah, I don't think I'm for that. I guess I prefer keeping it at just, the MTAP members. I think we have a good conversation. I think we have a candid conversation. And if we open it up to anyone, I could see some transit agencies popping in, and sometimes you need to vent about the transit agencies. So, yeah, I guess I would prefer keeping it at our group.
Before we even continue that question, for the others who are on in this meeting, involved in this meeting, not members of just the steering committee, does this make it, and if you haven't attended, would this make it more likely that you might attend our winter meeting? Send a chat. Either open the line and tell me what you think, or just send us a chat. Does it make you more likely to attend, less likely to attend? What do you think about that? I know from our perspective, from the steering committee perspective, I hear what you're saying, Kristen, and I think co-locating with them is great for logistical things. You know, it puts everything in one place. We don't have to have people traveling one week and then push ours off to another week and then travel to us the next week. You know, puts everything in one place. But is it really a good idea? What do you think? Jean, I see you turned on your camera, and I know you have a thought.
Well, I always have a thought. Whether it's a good one, who knows? But we've always attended the winter meeting, and we've always sent people to CTAA. So honestly, this wouldn't really impact. I don't think. It depends on what our leadership decides about travel. If they see a couple of us are already coming out to go to the MTAP winter meeting, they might say, well, you don't need to send anybody separate to CTAA, you're there already. So that may actually impact my ability to send other people to the CTAA Expo. As crazy as that sounds, but we're all in state government, we get it, right? So in theory, I think it sounds great. I'm a little worried about what the consequences might be. And as far as your other question, I know I'm not a steering committee, but I do like the separate meeting though, not opening it up to everybody, because I agree with Kristen. It's good conversation that we're able to have because of the size of the group. And I really have appreciated that interaction we've been able to have that you just can't have when it's hundreds of people. Those are my 2 cents.
Mr. Carr.
Yes, sir. One question that I'd like for us to consider. Are we going to pursue the roundtable as a part of the CTA meeting this cycle?
I'm going to say that the winter meeting is going to be our meeting. Whether or not we pursue a particular session as sort of that roundtable like discussion, with no particular agenda item, that could potentially happen. I mean, we've got a day and a half,
it's an opportunity.
2 days.
I don't know why we wouldn't take advantage of the opportunity of having all the right people there, right? And so I think we'd want to take advantage of the fact that we have such a wide variety of people to have. Maybe that's the answer to the question in terms of the crossover too. We have this one session at CTAA that's a potential crossover event.
Well, that's part of what I was trying to get at. I think that is a really good opportunity. And I guess I should have said this before. Let me back up a minute. Let me express gratitude for the folks who were on the DOT roundtable that we had. We've got really, really positive responses from that. And I would like for us to discuss a follow-on to the roundtable that is not necessarily driven by a meeting, but there's some information that CTA, Scott, and some other folks want to present to Nuria. And I think it's a great opportunity, but I think as much as we can share opportunities, if the roundtable as a session at CTAA continues, I think you have a great opportunity, and that in no way would infringe on the winter meeting, in my opinion. Now, that's just my opinion.
So the state DOT roundtable at CTA Expo is usually, as we have always hosted it, has been happens in the spring. I didn't want to miss another year of it, thinking that we would host a sort of a discussion virtually, as we just did in this past month, talking about spending down. But the CTA Expo is sort of like what we're envisioning for the winter meeting. It's not, we don't advertise it. It's not an advertised session at the CTA Expo. It is a member-only session, and we send out invites to people to participate. So unless, are we envisioning doing a winter meeting and the state DOT roundtable, like making the state DOT roundtable a public meeting,
Well,
a public
we-
session? Because that
It's
would
kind of
complicate
been
things.
between two worlds in the past, because I know it's been on the program before, but it usually says invite only on it.
Yes.
And so and I guess we don't have to know all the fine details today. I do feel pretty strongly, though, that first of all, I agree with what other people have said. I consider MTAP a winter meeting to be a working meeting. And for the most part, I would really, while I might be excited about bringing a few more state DOT people there than would otherwise come, I think it should be mainly state DOT. That being said, one of the things that co-locating does for us is it puts us in the same place at the same time as lots of our external partners. And doing a winter version of the roundtable, I think is an opportunity. And I think, and we can work out the details of what it looks like in terms of who we invite, who we don't invite, how public we make it. But it's so rare that we have all, that old saying about having all the right people around the room. And so we should try to take advantage of it.
I mean, I can envision a night, I can definitely envision doing it, have a day and a half of our meeting topics, maybe. Again, I'm just spitballing, like,
Yeah.
So the CTA roundtable is like, when they get into their sessions, it's Monday to Thursday, with Thursday being the big night out. I mean, I can envision a session where like the first day would be Wednesday. We would start our winter meeting, members only, like that Wednesday morning, go Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, to even finish it off on Thursday morning. And then maybe if we wanted to go 2 full days, that DOT roundtable could be, that afternoon on that Thursday. And then once we're done, we could all celebrate together and enjoy the big night out at the CTA Expo. I mean, I can envision sort of, the end all, we wouldn't invite, it would be sort of allow, make it a public meeting for members of CTAA to come join us for that roundtable. Is that, Charles, something that you could get behind?
Yeah, I mean, it works for me either way. I think we've got an excellent opportunity to do something since we're going to co-locate. But I think that the response and the engagement of our membership and the partners that were at our recent roundtable has opened the door for a different approach to how we can make this thing really work. we've tried to freshen it a bit, and we've tried to draw in some people so that we didn't have to create a list of things to do for that session. So now you've got really good opportunities, in my opinion.
And I mean, and frankly, and I think it would be ideal that, because Charles, I know you've been trying to go with that full roundtable, which is have an agendaless session and just get everybody around the table, and we could think about subtopics that we could throw out to people, but get people talking about what's going on in their states with their transit agencies on whatever topic we choose. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a set presentation, but again, come up with a set of questions that we want to ask folks, and we can make that happen. All right, so I'm hearing the folks, and I think that this is very positive. So we'll.
The other thing I'll chime in on is, I think we all face the same issues as Jean in terms of what she said about.
Hey, Richard, this is Dave. I'm not going to answer.
Dave, you're breaking up.
In favor of co-lo.
Dave, you're muted, and you're breaking up.
Candid with one another. And to address Jean's concern, I think that's a harder one to address, right? Just because, how many people could you send? Usually, I might not even go to CTAA and just send staff, but if this was happening, I would go as well. I feel like I could just get approval to send, probably 4 people. Other states may not have that flexibility. So, I think Jean's concerns are a real concern, but I don't know if it's one that could be worked around. But it can be different just because it'll be the first meetup for everyone. One's a training opportunity for staff, and one's a leadership opportunity for us. And I think that's the way it could be couched, post-COVID, first big meeting post-COVID. And teaming up with, co-locating with CTAA, who's our, valuable partner.
The thing I was going to say, David, is and I agree with Jean that I face that risk, but I also think it's an equal possibility that I'll be able to send twice as many people, because they'll just look at the names of all the different events and give the blessing to them, and then I get to do both.
Yeah.
And it's on the advertising, right? Like if we put in one request for MTAP annual or the MTAP winter meeting and one request for the CTAA Expo, 2 requests, 2 conferences. And so maybe that's more of an argument to keep them separate, but at the same time, but it's not just all one combined, because I do think there's more benefits than risks putting them together. So I didn't mean to give that wrong impression that I didn't think was a good idea. Just wanted to know some of the risks.
There's going to be a lot of ambiguity. No one really knows for sure what all the states are going to allow in terms of travel, even at this moment. I think we have some faith that by this time, things will be somewhat loosened up, but we don't know for sure.
And maybe, Richard, you could think about if it's advertised separately, if someone wants to go to the big night out, maybe they pay an extra, or maybe you'd say, hey, just because of the big night out, our registration is $100 instead of $50. I don't know how much it'll cost, but just, what I'm saying.
No, yeah, I'll work out the details on that. I really would like to be able to have every single person who is going to attend the winter meeting and the DOT roundtable all in one. That's going to be a spectacular event. Everybody who attends the winter meeting be able to go and get access to the big night out. But if we're going to hold it sort of that Wednesday, Thursday time frame, which means we end on that Thursday, we'd also have to think about, well, do we want to have everybody have their night off because there's nothing planned for CTA's Expo that Wednesday night? So we'd have to decide, do we want to have our own little gathering like we usually do at the winter meeting, which is great. I love it. But again, it's all logistical planning. It's, we can lean a lot on Jen DeBrule and the folks over at Virginia DRPT for a lot of help there. We're hoping Jen, yes.
Even if Jen's down in Orlando.
She's
Yeah.
she's got her camera off and she's got her microphone on, so I assume she's
No, wait a second.
she's working.
Phone, sorry. The lady that signs my paychecks was calling me, so,
That's kind of important.
yeah. So I am gonna have to go down to Orlando, but my plan is to be back in Richmond before a winter meeting.
Oh.
I'm gonna try to do both.
That's
Yeah, it's
mine.
unfortunate.
It's easy for me because Richmond is home. If I had to go like in another stop, that's a whole different thing.
You mean like Santa Fe?
I go back to Santa Fe.
I'd go back there in a heartbeat, yes.
Without the snow this time.
See, I left a day early because I had to come back because we had our governor's conference and I left Neil there in icy, snowy Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Hey, Gene, it's funny that you call that snow.
Yeah, I go to New Mexico to get away from Michigan snow. I didn't go there to see more.
All right, y'all, let's
Move on.
unless we have anything, I sort of have an idea of what the members want to hear or what I want to see from the winter meeting, and we'll work with CTA to make that happen. I'm hearing the whole winter meeting thing should be ours and ours alone, so we'll make that happen. And this DOT roundtable, I think, is a really good idea. I think a really great idea, a way of engaging members of CTAA to come join us for an afternoon discussion.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate enjoy the conversation. I'm sorry for the people on chat. I just haven't been able to get to the chat, type of responses to your answers. But if you have something you want to say, or if somebody on the call wants to raise a point, please feel free to open your mic, and you don't even have to turn on your camera. Just feel free to talk. That's why we have this meeting set up the way it is. It's a free-flowing discussion among all members. Oh, and Wiley, I saw you. I'm sorry. I've been just checking you out now. My apologies. I just saw you in the thing.
Hello.
All right. Did Liz from Florida show up? Liz, are you on? No, she must be still in her meeting. All right. Sorry, everyone. Next topic, MTAP coordination. Association Coalition Building, CTAA. Charles, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. As a follow-on to our roundtable that we had a discussion about what's next. I threw that out. Richard and I talked a little bit, but I also talked to folks at CTAA. And one of the things that seems to have been a reasonable idea, and I want to throw this at you, is to provide some follow-on information about how the funds were being programmed and expended, some illustration of the impact of those dollars, and got with Scott Bogren after he met with some of the staffers on the Hill. And DOT would like for us to put together a profile of a few states that we would offer as a really good illustration of how these funds were received, how they were programmed, and the impacts, to reinforce this idea that no one is just sitting on their hands and waiting to spend money. Likewise, no one just went out recklessly and said, we're just going to throw money out there on the streets to try to draw it down. We looked at a representative sample of some states, some DOTs, through the DOTs. We'd come to the profiles would be primarily of the DOTs and how subrecipient dollars were spent. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wyoming, Texas, Washington, and Tennessee kind of hit the locations for regional diversity, size, and those kind of things. haven't worked out specifically exactly what the profile itself would look like. We could do that in a matter of a day or so without a real problem. But Scott really wants to be able to put this in the hands of Nuria. She liked the idea. As a matter of fact, she specifically requested that Wyoming be included in the list. And I think we have an opportunity again to reinforce that message that I hope our roundtable was able to get out there pretty clearly. Folks are being very, very responsible in managing, programming, and accounting for these dollars. I'd like for you all to give some reaction to that if you would.
Charles, I'm sorry, can you go through that list again? You said Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wyoming, Texas,
Washington,
Washington,
yes, and Tennessee.
Tennessee.
So as one of the states, I can simply say we're game. You know, I think we, in terms of sharing the information about what we did and promoting it, and I don't think it'd be that heavy a lift either to describe it.
These would not be reports per se, and would not be extremely data driven, but it would be some really good information that would be in a profile.
We'd be happy to participate, Jean.
Okay.
I've already talked with Scott, and he said he already talked to you about it, so I'll be working directly with him to help put these together.
Okay. I just want us to take advantage, because there was a real positive energy from that roundtable, and I don't want us to lose that opportunity. I think this is something that we can replicate going forward. If that, nothing else in that regard, you've already talked about the expo being planned and that kind of stuff. Did I cut someone off? I'm sorry.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
I mean, is there a real fear about this clawback? I mean, personally, from what I've heard, I see this as, I don't know, sort of unfounded and maybe just sort of like maybe a scare tactic, just to make sure we're spending the money. But I mean, there's so much flexibility in how we could spend the money. And, you know, both from what we could spend it on to how long we have to spend it, that, you know, I'm not, you know, at least in your average case, not maybe in a case where people have received, or states have received like way more money, like a lot of money, where they're surprised with the amount of money they
What are you
receive.
talking about?
No one, no one. No one with a W or a upside down W.
Well, Dave, I don't see that the clawback issue is as much of a concern as really wanting to come up with, and I know people like to use the term best practices, but these would be some illustrations to point to. These would be some examples of, this is how it's being done. This is what's working out there.
And I guess the other way I see it is it's about the intent. You know, the intent of these bills was to help communities now. And so the more we can demonstrate that, the better, and that we're doing it responsibly, terrific.
I just, you know, there's always different ways to skin a cat, but I'd like, you know, I think the story should be pretty simple. Like, we should keep it simple. You've gave us 3 years of money, and right now we're a year into this, right? Technically, well, a year and a couple months, and most of us have spent a third of the money, or a little bit more, and, you know, a little bit more to cover the match. But a lot of us have state match that we spent, and, you know, so that's where things differ. But if we're all around, we spent a third of the money, you know, I don't know, you know, the cost of masks and PPE and cleaning supplies wasn't as great as we thought. And, you know, we kept, for the most part, I think everyone kept afloat. How many, you know, how much of the money did you spend, and how many agencies did you lose? And, I think it could be a very simple but compelling story rather than, where all these, however many state stories come together. And I think tying that all together is important. And that should be the message, because that's where we all come together. And, as far as how the money was spent and the way in which it was spent. Some of the states are in different situations, and that's an aside. But basically everyone through 40% of the 3 years of funding, we've spent 40% of the money, and very few agencies have gone under. I mean, looking at it without getting too deep, I think that's a story that could be told from a higher level that I think is important to get out, because I think it's a good one. And no one was fired. So I just think there just needs to be a way to carry it all together. I don't know, in this case, it's the differences that make this a compelling story. I think it's the things that tie it all together.
I can understand, I think, what you're saying, Dave. Again, I believe that it's that chance to toot the horn and show it's working. And here's a representative sample around the country. If folks at DOT are asking for that, like some cliff notes, I think we can really help ourselves by giving them that.
I mean,
So I just
otherwise,
wanna- I
Charles,
just-
if we don't supply that, they'll draw their own conclusion.
So let me back up a little bit, because after our DOT roundtable, the Friday after it, we participated in the FTA industry leadership meetings with Nuria. She's, I think I've reported in the past, she's sort of taking over the same style meetings that Jane Williams instituted once the COVID pandemic shut things down. She wanted monthly reports about what was happening at the state level as well as at transit agency level. So every month we were participating. Actually, they started as almost weekly to bi-weekly calls, and as things progressed, they've just went into monthly calls. So we had our monthly call. It was supposed to be our April call, but we had it in May. And if you ask whether or not they're concerned about clawback, they never talked about clawback, but they really are concerned about going to the Hill with future requests for transit, given, so she said to the effect that 820 CARES Act, 820 CARES Act applications have been processed, which is great. I think they're at 97% obligation, but there's still 80, according to them, 87 recipients have obligated $0, and that includes small, urban, and tribes. So they're never going to say they're concerned about clawback, but clawback is an issue. But they're concerned also about future, and whether or not future requests for funding for transit are going to, fall on deaf ears if we're not obligating and expending this money. So in terms of CARES Act, there's a significant amount of people who have spent that, but then it drops significantly when we talk about CRISA, and even more significantly when we talk about ARPA, the American Rescue Plan.
And I don't think any of that's a surprise, and none of that should be a surprise. I think we're kind of all saying the same thing. This is our chance to kind of brag, say we're doing good things with the money. I wouldn't even, well, obviously.
I'm just reporting.
Yeah,
I only report what I hear. I'm not allowed to talk in these meetings, so I have to be mum. Go ahead, Jean, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't know why I'm ever baffled by how the federal government or legislators think, but we, of course, do not ever anticipate money continuing to flow. So we have been trained to act conservatively. So of course, we did not spend the CRRSA funds at the same time we were spending the CARES Act funds. That would have been fiscally foolish of us. And so we planned it so that we could spread this money out, because no one knows how long the impacts of the pandemic will last. So perhaps, I mean, it seems like a foolish thing to have to explain, but perhaps explaining that will be beneficial, that, you know, we have to be fiscally responsible. And that would have been incredibly irresponsible of us to spend all of that money all at once when no one knows when this pandemic will truly end and how long it will take the economy to truly recover. That's all I'm gonna say. Preaching to the choir, I know.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with you.
This
Go ahead,
is
Deborah.
Sarah
Yes.
Ora.
Sarah.
Okay. I'm with the Arizona DOT. I want to make sure that when we're talking about this as a story, we also understand that many of those that are tribal communities have been completely shut down by the pandemic. And so they were unable to obligate for good reason. They were so hard hit that their whole government shut down. So they did not obligate funds because they didn't have any activity. They desperately need the funds, and it has to be understood that there's a good reason why they did not obligate. They weren't operational.
But a little pushback on that is that even though they were operational, there should have been some obligation, because the idea behind CARES Act, and let's just even just say CARES Act, was to keep the folks who are operating the buses employed.
So no one, you know.
And I know there was nobody there to process things. I know it's a very complicated situation, but the idea was to keep people employed.
And believe me, FTA is not going to come down on the tribes for slow walking and or acting slow. I mean, it's just not an issue. Deborah, your turn.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks. So this is what's been going on with New Mexico with our CRRSA money, and any unobligated 5310 we had to distribute. There were no clear guidelines on how to apply for that. So I just applied for it in my regular TRAMS method. And then when I submitted the application, all of a sudden they came up, FTA emailed me back, rejected my grant, and said, oh, wait, we have new guidelines on this. So there's not even clear guidelines on how to apply for this money. So we even had emergency relief funds that we were using through our regular 5311 funds. And even that has a different method that they just sort of refined and came out with a document with instructions to follow on how to apply for it. So I think New Mexico has really done some creative things. We had a little bit of unobligated 5310 money that we used to combine with our CRRSA, our small amounts of CRRSA money. I think we got probably a little over 100,000 for each of the three areas, the rural, the urban, the small urban, and the large urban. And we put all of that together to provide the other 20% of the local match for the capital, because we had agencies coming back to us saying, look, we can't even afford our 20% match for the vehicle that we were awarded the last fiscal year. So we're kind of piecing what we can together to help make them whole, to carry them through just another fiscal year. So yeah, and I just think a lot of this is FTA, you know, just is scrambling to come up with a method to apply for a lot of these different special little allocations that are coming out.
So I think we're having two different conversations here. The first conversation is, do we want to do these brag pieces? And I think it's easy. It is, yes, we're going to do these brag pieces talking about how we're doing good things with the money. The second conversation I think we're starting to have here is sharing information about the struggles and the way that we're actually overcoming the different challenges that FTA is putting on this. And I think the thing I would suggest is, that sounds like a good topic for us to discuss just amongst ourselves at a future meeting. is, and any of the challenges we're continuing to have, and our workarounds. And I think that would be great, but I think we should keep these two topics separate.
Yeah, Don, I agree, but I think what Deborah was saying is, and to tie it into what Richard, well, no one's applied for CRISA. I guess why no one's applied for CRISA? Because you won't let us apply for CRISA, I think is what Deborah's saying. So, FDA shouldn't be asking that question. And they shouldn't be concerned with no one applying for CRISA if they're not processing grants because they have a new methodology in applying for CRISA.
I know, but
And
they
maybe
are.
they don't-
I'm just saying, they're asking.
Right.
They're going to always ask.
And
they're
listen,
going
there's
to
no
beat us
surprises.
up every month over it.
Congress is asking them, they're scrambling, they're asking us, they're trying to justify it, but that's all just part of doing business in our world. And so I think that's all right. And we have good answers for this stuff.
Okay.
Let's call it and move on, I think.
Yes, I think we need to move on to a different topic. Since Jen dropped off of APTA regarding APTA, I think the only update we have is next week is their legislative conference. Hope to see you there. Hope to see me there. Hope to see you all there. Don, National RTAP.
Yeah, and so the main thing is something that Richard mentioned in passing earlier on, which is that we are working with RTAP to put on it's for us, just for us, intercity bus discussion at our previous chat. I can't remember. I think it was at the last version of this meeting that we started talking about it, and it just kind of very quickly escalated and became clear that we needed to have a special session just on what's going on with intercity bus. Right now, my rough plan is that we're developing with Robin and some others is kind of just do a very quick, because we've heard from a couple of people who are traditionally certified that they already meet the intercity bus and don't put any intercity bus money in, that do a very quick intercity bus 101, including how you do consultation and certification and how those different things work together, that we would potentially use 3 different states to come up with as different models on how they do their intercity bus programs. And then mainly have kind of question and answer session then for folks to be able to get up to speed on how in the intercity bus world and how to do an intercity bus program. Moving on quickly to some of the other things that National RTAP has going on. They have a couple of webinars coming up that caught my eye. May 26th is building blocks of leadership and inclusion, talking about, I know this is something probably that many state DOTs are dealing a lot more with. There's a lot more focus on how we have inclusion in our programs. And so that's one of the things that caught my eye. Another one that was pretty interesting to me is coming up in June 10th. They have mobile trip planners and how to train perhaps some hard to serve clients on how to use mobile trip planning. I know this has been an ongoing issue for years and years when folks about access to goods and services and how information is often a barrier. And so I think this could be a pretty interesting information. And that's it for my National RTAP update.
Okay, great. And I will now open up to anybody who wants to talk any interesting conversations with, aside from the interesting conversations I have with FTA, are there any members who want to report an interesting conversation they had with FTA? Hopefully that's non-COVID related. Maybe your birthday or something like that. Something else other than COVID. All right, hearing none. We can move on to technical initiatives. I'll go to item 2 first, the online forum on intercity bus. Don, good news. Apparently, if you really want to get through the National RTAP and you can't get through to Nellie or to Robin, you go to Liz Taylor and she makes good things happen.
Okay.
So she made good things happen. And I heard from Nellie today, unfortunately, she wanted to talk with me about this intercity bus forum right in the middle of 2 meetings that I was trying to attend at the same time. So I will connect with her in the morning to make sure that this session occurs, and we'll work out the timing and sort of the format. But I think if you're looking for a members only, I'd have to negotiate that given the fact that they are a national center. So they might not be able to just do a state DOT thing. They might be obligated to have to open it up to not necessarily the entire world, but to others in the transit community.
So I think that's fine. I would then say we should have it on the subsequent agenda for this meeting so that we can have a peer-to-peer support element to it. Because that's kind of what I was hearing the need was when the people who are bringing up their concerns is like, should I be listening to Greyhound?
Nope, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. I'm just saying from the perspective of national, I don't know what the perspective of national RTAP is going to be on this particular one.
Okay.
But I will emphasize the need for a peer-to-peer among states and see if they can make that happen. Next, if you read the last 2 MTAP e-news, you'll know that FTA sent out a Dear Colleague letter regarding its new oversight approach to COVID-19 relief funds. And they're going to start doing spot reviews. Just so you know, we received an offer from Scott Gearing in the Office of Oversight, our favorite man to target. You know, he's sort of like he's the board to our darts. So he's offered to do a session for us to talk about their new approach. And I'm hoping that's something everyone would be amenable to. In addition, we could then pepper him with questions about SMRs and the top 10 findings at the time. So stay tuned. We're putting that together. Hopefully that'll be happening in June, early June, if not then late June. And then last but not least, moving on to research. If Charles, if you're still on, if there's something you want to report. Or did he drop off? Charles Carr? Charles, I can't hear you if you're talking. All right. Also in the MTAP e-news, you should know that research is good for us. So the Research and Innovation Committee, Special Committee for AASHTO, voted on April 15th for NCHRP's FY 2022 projects. And our top 3 priorities for this year were approved by them. Our number 1 priority, which was sustaining zero fare public transportation programs in a post-COVID-19 world, was approved for $300,000 in funding. And Dave should know because he was the one who submitted this, but our number 3 priority was approved for funding. B23, Planning for Innovative and Emerging Mobility Futures at Intermodal Passenger Facilities, was also funded and funded at $50,000 more than they asked for, so $200,000. So that received our support and was our number 3 priority. Also, this is going to be a rather large research project because TCRP funded it at $100,000 and ACRP funded it at $150,000. So it's going to be a significant project. And our number 2 priority, benefit analysis of private health sector investments in public and human transportation. Our number 2 priority was approved as a contingency project. So it is not necessarily funded yet. The request I think was for $300,000, but it is a contingency project, which means it was number 2 contingency project selected by the R&I committee. So that means if 2 projects that were approved from other committees drop off, number 1 and number 2 contingencies would be picked up in their stead. Otherwise, this I think has a really good shot at FY23 funds, just because. But I want to let everybody know that because that information is all in the MTAP e-news and what I thought was very important to know. And in terms, what else did I want to mention about research? Otherwise, we're going to be looking again, starting for the fall, November 1 or November 2 is the next deadline for NCHRP funding for FY23. So if you have a good idea, run it by me and let's talk. We really need more states to step up and do more research. Oh, I'm sorry. The one thing I did want to bring up about this, actually, during the meeting, we did a sort of a debrief at sort of the AASHTO level, and what's disappointing in this whole process is that we only, while B23, the one on intermodal passenger facilities is good and we support it, it's not necessarily one of our projects because we didn't write it. Dave submitted it from New Mexico. It's not really one of our projects. So we technically only got 300,000 this year. Other AASHTO committees, specifically even the AASHTO Active Transportation Committee, submitted a bunch of projects, and I think they only have one. And there was a lot of complaining going on, knowing the whole idea behind having our go into this new dynamic, this new paradigm when it came to selecting research projects, was that we would be more competitive than we were before. Because last time, as you know, we had the 2065 project, but that went away. We were allocated $450,000 annually for research projects, but that went away. But there was a whole outcry during our debrief, which is sort of this, was disappointing for a lot of committees who thought that, well, we should go back to that paradigm of setting aside funding for things like transit and for active transportation, because if the special committee on research and innovation is not going to vote for our projects, then what's the purpose? I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not necessarily advocate for it, but we got in terms of our primary project less than we have gotten in the past 2 years. Charles, I'm sorry.
Richard, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to step out and I forgot. But I appreciate the update. But one of the things I think this illustrates again is, and I'm going to keep tooting this horn about the research roadmap, that we can help define projects, we can help plan for projects, and it will give us a basis for. Our community has put a lot of thought into this. We've had consultant assistance in helping us to identify our research priorities, although they can change as things do change, but it gives us a better shot. I would think that we can pursue that and start looking at that over the next few months, because I think those dollars are still going to be available.
Thank you for that. Again, so if you have a thought about a research project that you want to see happen, just let us know, because that November deadline is going to come up awfully quick. And enough of that. So on to other ideas and announcements. The one that I have, stay tuned, sending out an email about upcoming MTAP elections. Not that there's a lot of controversy right now in terms of MTAP elections. We have 2 members who are up for re-election. Andy from Michigan and Shirley from Mississippi. And they're both eligible for re-election. That don't necessarily mean, so we have absolutely this is the first time in history, we have no open seats. But again, I can't preclude anyone from running if they want to run, especially if in an election year. So I will send out an announcement calling for nominations. And if you want to submit a form, submit a picture, and we'll have an election and elect either Andy and if no one submits, that means Andy and Shirley get re-elected by acclamation, and there will not be a survey sent out for an election. But if there are people who want to run, please feel free to send us the completed form and a picture. And that is all I have to report for the rest of this steering committee meeting. Are there any questions or comments? Don?
I'm just tuning in to thank everybody. Thank you, Richard, for your leadership and helping us throughout today. And thank everybody for another great discussion.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Get vaccinated, please.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Got to get back to Ashton.
Bye.
Subject to post-accident testing.
Goodbye.